see her own imagination, her own system, and brings her mind to life. Life is an existence of information sending grounds. How we formulate and how we simulate ourselves is up to us. So it's knowing how we see ourselves, our own calculations of adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. This has nothing to do with anybody else's calculation. You can't make mistakes. You understand that? Because you're always ongoing. So if you're always ongoing, how can you make mistakes if you've already gone through that already? But they're not mistakes. You just think they're mistakes because you don't understand yourself, your own system. Right? That's what we have to come into. The most powerful thing for you guys to identify is all levels of inside. How to talk to yourself inside is how to project everything outside. So there's two conversations of one cycle. Okay? Mind speaks volume. As you guys are speaking to me, this is what I do. I just see codes, waves, or wherever you are in scent lines of your modification system of travel, right? So how are you, right? How are you, okay? How are you, right? Now that forms as a question, doesn't it? But it's all of its own travel, right? So this is how you are sending me codes. This is how I pick it up through waves or anything in your system and sending where you are in your imagination or where you are in your behavior lines sending the content. So I know if you're separate in your mind, static interference, magnetic interference, electronic interference, electrical impulse interference, everything is interference, which means you're separate in your minds. Okay? Once you get separate in your minds, you create the headspace. Headspace is no correlations of balance until you modify your setting, descramble your occasions, you scramble yourself, which is just an anagram. Process of THE, okay, is ETA. We already know what that is in setting, right? But sir, that doesn't make any sense. How can THE be ETA? Because I'm processed in different frequencies, a different volume, a different truth, and how I see it through its narrative and how I see it through its false. Process of position, how I see it in line connection, signed to its formation system, to its extension of its teleportation of its awareness. So it doesn't matter what you say, it's how you say it to your system. How you speak, volumes, everything, your codings, your E-factors are coding, their quantum or cyber or anything in that position you're sending calculations in your systems. So what you have to truly understand is how are you, okay, is basically a what? Well, let's start off with the H. Just start singularity, right? So there's 4 singularities here. 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay? 4 singularities of H. Now, how I process that, when you guys convert to me, it's all through online position of dimension. So dimension, you have to process equal, or you cannot process time, or you can ask question lines of screen locations. So you see what you see fit. So that's 8 screen and box frame, okay, which is a window frame. Now record this center operation, which becomes a window frame. There's the window. Now we change the platforms to change the axles of time frame and set travel as it goes in position its operation setting, right? So as you speak, this is what I pick up. I see your waves. I know where your central lines on alpha. I know where you are at delta. I know where your headings. I know where your convergence. I know where you are in position. I know where you're in mind. I know where you're in imagination. I know where you're in your thoughts. I know where your actions. I know where you're in emotions. I know where your behavioral system. I know where you are in time, lineage of operations setting and travel. Okay? That's a lot to converse with in one setting. A 1 second per pi. That's 1 second per pi, guys. Now, it depends on where you are in your frequency lines of grounds. And this process your system when you come in your own transitions of screens. So we process lines of indication, lines of calculation, ground settings, lines of travel. Okay, so I'm fine, which is replying back, right? So I'm just trying to get you guys to understand these things because you'll be able to understand how to do this in your systems and travel. Okay? Okay. Okay, I'm fine, right? So I'm fine is referred as what? Well, what I pick right away is your behavior. I look at your separation. If you're not separated, you're good. But if you're separated, you're like this right away. There's a separation, which means you're not calculated to your mind lines, is space. You're connected to your head space, a travel converting setting, offline set location of travel. See, your modification, your modems, your satellites are not in balance of communication of center, which means your opposition of 3 centers of angles of past, present, future of operation. See the confusion? There's an anagram. Okay? Now, You have to recognize how you see everything in mainframe, the process position. The brain sees everything from outside, from inside of you. Try to understand the correlation, setting, convergence, how a phone sees you. Remember, we got in that positions, right? So it's all through waves, mega waves, central waves, multi waves, delta waves, right? Everything's a wave. Your formation is landmass of how you see things, but when people are speaking to you, I only see position lines and settings. I'm doing fine, great, thank you very much. I appreciate your indication system. I'm going through flux line, ground centers, lines of travel. I'm setting lines of energy line, wave line, rotations, and convergence setting. This is what I'm sending back to you, to brain convergence lines, position, adaptation cycles that had convergence system, adaptation, and flux. So that's what I send back to you, to your brain. Okay? Just waves itself that travels on its own system. Okay? Travels on its own system. All right? Fortitude, latitude, latitude, fortitude, latitude, fortitude, latitude, fortitude. Okay? And then you come into the big waves. Big waves are like this: alpha, delta, theta of operation omega. Okay? So your chart waves. Change panels, the screen adaptation of flux that changes the course centers of timeline. Right? But this is all happening inside the brain, guys. But it's all identified through the eyes. Everything is in the eyes, right? So you correlate the communication of the brain frequency pattern, process lines of indications, change the alpha line delta, set converting line condition setting. There's the process position location system, time centers, time sequence, time calculation line, ground centers, high operation lines of sequence. Latitude, your computer line coding, directing lines of QRO coding, all line condition setting, quantum line rotation, travels point lines of graph, converting line operation line signals, line condition setting position, line condition setting, line centers and sequence, G rotation lines and setting, operation lines, rotation lines, and high center interference, setting communication line, direct line, ground centers, and position location of a system that puts I clouds to E clouds, internal one flux line, one direct location setting that gets a communication system all through travel, a tree of life. There's the tree. And it's all happening inside the eye. That's your brain. So your brain introverts inside, not here. That's the headspace. Headspace is the ego space. Now, what we have to start recognizing, how we formulate and how we see ourselves, is all inside our system, right? But that's nothing but energetic waves of the brain itself that converts the settings of operation. That's a lot of ways of communication traveling inside your minds, inside calculation in your eye. Okay? That's the tree of life inside the eye, right? So how this all works, guys, is the mind speaks volume, but as you're speaking, the brain is converting its system and creating vision, and cortex of theta. So it's trying to process what you're seeing, and when it processes what you're seeing, it connects to its wave. So in sense, you say triangle, you're saying triangle. But how a brain connects to another brain, it's this. This is the triangle, trying to put it together. Okay? Brain, you, and setting. Right? So you have to merge the correlation inside travel. There's the balance. Okay? So you got the mind space and you got the head space. Okay? Balance of operation, pixelation grounds, yin and yang. Okay? 6 and 9. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. So everything you set up is its own schematic, its own pie. How you modify that is basically how to understand how to live in the eyes of the windows of the soul. And that's what we're going to process today. Okay, all through platforms. So we'll go through 3 grounds. Okay, does it look like 3 grounds? No, not until I change the axle. Now it's the grounds, which is the center, right? So just knowing exactly what you're doing through your mind, get some position, location, measure, and scale. You can change the fonts, you can change the correlations, you can change the alphabetical line ground centers, you can change the equilibriums. As you're processing everything, there's no way you can make mistakes of any information system all through travel. Okay, you can't make mistakes. There's no way, because it's already done through its equation. But see, this is an outline signal outside the eye itself. See? Spectrum outside the eye. Okay? Now, that is the ego. You're processing here now. So you're out of the eye. You're out of the spectrum. You're out of that position is what? The browse adapters. The browse adapters are the eye line centers. Now, the correlation setting convergence system, you got to be cautious what you're doing with the headspace, because if you're not identifying the headspace, it sets up descrambler location of factors of aligned rotation offline setting that puts you in an obsolete location, absolution location, and convergence setting off travel. Sets position, bring in the altered space of time frame inside lines of confusion. So you're bringing confusion inside the eye. Change the webs, change the graphs, change the screens. Adaptation of flux. So it changes measure and scale and rotates the opposite direct location setting to its void itself. Void over center, 0 over 1. So it travels at point graphs. 3 centers of calculation of line conditions and convergence of direction. Now, inside line conditions, change the axle again, change formation lines of setting. Platitude line condition, change the axle again, change the line communication of setting. Changing formation setting, time frame, time centers, time calculation, time square, time roots, times pi. All through graph, all through screen. High centers, 3 centers of calculation, triangulation, 1 center, operation line, direct line, ground centers, lines of sequence. Platitude operation location setting. Now we're going to convert this setting to outline setting. So we're going to override the ego, set convergence back into the mind of its ego of its space in fortitude locations of 3 lines of position, ether, core, and firmament, and travel. Setting operation line signals puts position lines at ground centers, location setting, and its platforms at EQ, process lines QR. There you go. All in set position. Routes the routers, travels point lines graph, fortitude locations, and time formats and time replacements. Sets convergence and time locks. Eye division and location of spectrum. Oh yeah. Now it's back in balance. It's platform, right? So eye division and eye line center. Browse adapters is the process of anything about line centers. What if I told you that extra browsers, the location is the line connected to its core, to its firmament, to its ether, to its system, to its firmament. That's why you have a browsers. Think of the browsers as line signals of your firmament. Anything above that is headspace. This is head empty space of 0. This is empty space of 0 of mind space. So you have to truly understand how to see the trinity of you, information system to the eye itself that changes all spectacle system, how you see it through all line conditions at all levels. That's that position of travel. Okay? A lot going inside that eye. All right. So I'm just trying to show you on so many levels how you see that information setting up close and set lines of travel levels of position. Pretty incredible stuff. But see what happens when the headspace comes in the eye itself that overrides the signals of what's already in mind of center of operation of the system that's already platitude everything through its creation of creating. So don't create thoughts because it confuses lines of browser adaptators. The adaptation of your system has no lines of energetic flux, and that brings in the cookies, that brings the application, that brings your filters, that brings your buffering system, your CPU. Offsetting, off track, on communication of roguing. Opposition lines of travel, okay? All through the eyes. Okay, that's a central line, position location to your right eye. Not your left, you're just your right. That's all happening in your right eye right now of operation. Because everything platitudes in the eye itself, guys. Okay? Very complicated construct of a drawing for you to see that information. Look at that. Look how powerful that is. You know, amazing how you bring that outside structure of your earth line. Now you see it in real time. It's incredible, right? When you understand how to see the eyes, which is the windows of the soul. The factors, your setting locations of your mainframes. Correlation frame, track frames are in location identification setting. How you see that in position operation its film strip of design. Okay? Pretty amazing when you bring it up really close in set position. There's your simulation. Okay? So that's what you got to get into position of practice mode through the eye itself. So every time you change the eye, you're changing the flux. Change the flux, change the time, change parameters of process, position lines of travel. So every time your eyes blink, they blink seconds over a square and set position of operation. Changing ground centers, change flux over panels. Your eye division location sets new propellers or rotation lines of cycle. A high generator screen location system, all through calculation grounds. Look at this and set position of operation. Okay? Higher levels of expanding in set lines of rotation. All right? So, see it in all different angles. Okay? So let's say your eye twitches 12,001 signal. Okay, so your eye is here. We'll start with this panel. Okay? But you got this much in set of operation to go through webbing. Okay, process here and process here. Okay, in set position. Okay? So this is your line setting. Anything above the browsers is changing the filters, your buffering system, and your echo, your frames, your travels, your communications, right? So let's get position of center operation in your setting. Platitude position is equal line course centers and convergence, directing ground centers and platforms line condition setting to its bedding system and transits over screen. Okay? And remember, it's all inside the eye. Okay? So it's much easier because you see the round rotation. Fibonacci this way, inside lines of travel. Okay? See it? See the portal? Then you change the line axle again. There's your commodities of your structure of your building. Platitude location, ground centers 1, 2, 3 centers of travel, 4 to 2 location lights, electrical line grid, line communication of fencing. There's the fence. Outside line, inside rotation. So it's living inside the eyes, all time, all aspects, all one setting. In real time and rotation, a triangulation system, all through calculation of travel. Okay? So it's pretty amazing stuff we can do through platitudes and location. Okay? All right. So getting things in real time is understanding the inner structure to the outer structure, provision, location, and cycle, all through set position setting. But it's really powerful stuff once you start to recognizing your webbing system of light and dark and light and rotation. Okay? Now you can project outside. Now you can see reality. There it is. Your body's seen it through doppelganger, which you created in your mind, which is actually projection of yourself. That fortitude, your lights and darks at the same time measure and scale. So your eye rotates, check this out. Your eye rotates 3 seconds over screen, 6 lines of 1, cross lines of 9 lines of 12, and 12 centers of measure and 24 clocking. So every time your eyes twitch, that's what it's going through. 3, 6, 9, 12, and 24 are clocking. Didn't know that, did you? Now you do. So we clock your centers of travel, directing to grounds, operation sequence, panel centers, and screen location. Okay? Change the axle again. That 4 to 2 locations of lights. Platitude, equal line, ground centers, operation panel, operation lines, operation travel of communication. Right? There's your pyramid. Change the axle again. And panel says screen location, dimensional doors. Eye sequence, eye centers of travel. Okay? Now we have 3 coordinates, 2 centers of flux, okay, and browse adapters above location. There's your browse adapters, line signals. Those are your security panels. The eye itself is process line condition setting that processes your system all through travel. Converts lines, headspace comes in lines of travel, which is the ego. Ego has to come in. It has to. Okay? You've got to create that. It's like Superman without an alter ego. He's not Clark Kent. Or is it Superman being exposed? Superman walking around the office. Come on. All right? Platforms over E factors, screen lines, adaptation, process lines of pi, and travel communication. Directing ground centers in position of portal line centers of sequence location of travel. And in online centers, directing online position of flux, the process position lines of online sequence in location of travel calculation. Okay? Looking at fortitude inside rotation of travel. There's your simulation. Bring it in position. Now you're adding new time frames. New correlations, new panels, new programming in your simulation. Okay, bring in intelligence. Right? It's at the eye line rotation. Okay? Okay, so I think we're getting a little bit more understanding how this works now in platitudes. And like I said, it's doing that 10-minute video, gets you in positions, how you get in position lines and settings, how you communicate your system, creating that lines anomaly of tree of life. Okay? So as you understand how the brain works, then you understand how the brain works within inside your system. But it has to understand the coordinations of your setting because it doesn't need to identify itself because it's already gone through time. Consciousness of awareness is what you are. Okay, awareness or consciousness is who you are. Consciousness of being aware is everything of you are. Everything in setting, which is ongoing. Okay, simple, easy, done. But remember, everything that we're doing, you know, it's really interesting to live in the body, but it's very hard to live in the mind of the body, which is the eye itself. Okay? Mastering yourself inside is mastering the projections, how you see outside. So, you know, once you get in position, your eye itself is nothing but yin and yang of processing. Your eye is yin and yang. Okay, there's the 6 and 9. Now you get the gratitude, longitude, and fortitude location lines of travel. Okay? Then you process the compass, process line direct location, the eye lines as center. Sets position lines of travel. Then you get your platforms of transits and fortitude location setting and position of processing. And then you come your location grid and set lines of calculation. Then you come in your portals of communication setting to your rainbow and your frost bridge of travel. Okay? So it's amazing how everything is happening inside the system. Okay? And then when you bring in programming, you're bringing yourself in. Okay? And 4 different angles at different running programs all at once and travel. Okay? So that's why you have to be very cautious now, because when you come in your foundation, your 12 and 24s, you're not just basically revealing things, you're observing and you're creating realities through the eyes. So the eyes, let's get in profile. This is what you're in positions of. Okay, this is what's going to happen. You're sitting in foundation. Okay, your eyes are going to travel here, top, bottom, center. Okay, but you are the operation of your system that sees fortitude lights and circulation and rotation like this. Fortitude locations and setting. Okay, so that's how you start seeing all directions all at once. Okay, and platforms. Okay, and traction. Okay, that's how we're going to start seeing. So you're going to see inbound, outbound, outbound, outpost. Now, knowing exactly how to go through platforms and you position your beddings and platitude locations and travel. Okay, knowing how to get in position, change the axles of your eyes and travel communication. All right. So every time your eyes switch, they fortitude the lights of light and dark of center operation in your system. Okay, the platitudes your operation setting, orbs of communication your setting, detection. Okay, so everything is created from the eyes, the windows of the soul. And when you bring it in closely, you see all levels of the simulation that you created inside your mind. Face recognition, see? And then bringing in programs is you. You can bring in colors too. Colors are purple and set lines of travel. Okay, bring it in program. Can't see it till you see it. Can't see it because it's a cloak and dagger. Now you can see it. Can't see it, now you see it, right? But you're in mind control of your system. All you're identifying is what you're doing, guys. All these drawings are coming from the eyes. Okay, coming from the eyes itself. Okay, nothing is left to chance until you truly understand how to modify yourself inside the eyes itself of travel. Okay. Reaching a course line, directing ground centers, set position operations. So take 5-10 minutes of your day and travel through your minds of your eyes. Okay, because that puts everything on platforms of what you're doing in set position of operation. Okay? But remember, in position, you're coming into headspace. It's that signal, which means you're out of line. Okay, stay within the line, stay without the line, right? So when you're drawing a box, that's a box, right? So in position, all through travels, this is outline box. Okay, this is the headspace, that's the ego. So if you're not balanced with the ego comes in and creates its own ego of flux, a flotation system of travel. So it changes all calculation grounds, your powers, and your adversaries of travel. Okay, change your flux, change the position of fortitude lights into your earth, a rotation, and your travels of point lines graph and rotation itself in travel communication. Okay, so now you don't have any control of your eye lines of spectrum of travel in space or time. Okay, that's the alteration ego. All right, because you're not allowing yourself to balance what you want to bring in through calculations, right? Like I said, Superman needs an alteration ego, but you have to process the ego, to balance the characters, players of the ego itself. Because if you don't balance the ego is going to balance you inside the system. It's set lines of travel. And it goes its own rotation of its own system. Which you have no mind control of your settings of your thoughts, action, emotions, because every time you get up in the morning, your thoughts are in provision are going backwards now. Okay? Now the ego itself is going forward, creating a timeline image, splitting lines of your anomaly and set lines of its tree. Okay? So it implicates the system and separates your mind into your past, present, and future. Booyah! Face recognition, see? Face recognition of the ego is coming in set lines of position, location, timeline, lineage that change you all align in position or system, all through calculation setting. So it's controlling you in the mind of imagination system of setting. Booyah. Okay? So this is what an alteration ego can do if you don't identify the characters and players you bring in. Goes one way, goes the other way. All right? Process the headspace, but don't bring in the headspace itself until you identify what you're bringing in through the alteration of its ego. Everything needs an ego, okay? Which is your yin to your yang, okay? Your yin to your yang, okay? A balance, yin to yang, right? Yang to yin. Doesn't matter how you see it in an affirmation setting, but they're always together, right? In the mind, right? But in prophecy, they're on their own of separation. Okay, so they're in their own mind adaptation of their own imagination. You're never separable. Just nothing is touching anything. There's nothing of anything physical touch. It's the mind that processes the bridging of what you're doing instead of operation. So it's infinity 8, is that let's travel. Creating that bridge from this to this of operation. Platitude in position of triangulation of box information system. Okay, there are your platforms of travel, of creating. Okay, then you have to have a location grid. Okay, that's an energetic dome, or sentience and agents can come in your system. Okay, so it's just trying to understand how to mind speak your system, guys, in volume, right? So when you're speaking to somebody and somebody's speaking to you, you're picking up the waves, you're picking up the energy, you're picking up the factors, you're picking up the lights, you're bringing the coloration, line the pattern, you're bringing up the coding. So how's it going today? Well, 0-1 line, operation line, triangulation line is the box. Thank you very much. That's what I picked up when you come back to me. That's all I pick up. So 0 lines, operation lines, you got an alpha line, delta line, position, converting, sending, position, behavior, centers, off propagation, separation. That's what I see in you. Right? And that's all coordinated through the central line, to the intelligent lines, to its internal of its brain. The brain doesn't have a landmass, okay? The brain itself is an operation of its own system, it's its own concept, its own space of itself. So it's very powerful how everything is done by itself, where you don't think of thoughts, action, emotions. You don't do anything, it's already done. So there's nothing you do, it does it itself. So everything hits by itself. So you're just the wind that knocks everything down, okay? You're just the air, you're just the earth, you're just the fire. You're just the heart that does everything of its own system, of its own operation setting, all through travel, all through recognition, all through pattern, all through light metaphor, all through coloration. A pattern recognition of time and space and time, right? So I'm going to leave you in that aspect, but I just want you to process the technology you can create instead of the eyes itself of rotation. The technology is amazing, what you're saying, how to use the mind of adaptation. Okay, when you take your naps and when you go into sleep. Okay, we'll get into that in that position, all right? Get into procedures step by step, and procedure locates the setting to its position. All right? Okay. See you guys in DQ.